Talofa lava to all of our viewers today. Special talofa to all of our Year 12 English students. I hope that you are all ready to learn something new. But before we can start, make sure that you turn off all those distractions, all of those devices, so that there are no distractions during our lesson. Today's lesson will be focusing on Strand 2, reading and writing. Specifically, we'll be talking about poetry, just like our previous lessons. The key learning outcome of this lesson is to demonstrate understanding of literature through analyzing selected poems. Hopefully you all remember our poems that we have studied so far. The first poem is Father and Son by Rupiraki Betaya. And our second poem is Darkness Within the Lights by Karaka Karaka. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify the title of the poems and their poets. Compare the two poems, identify the poetic devices, and compare messages, themes, and issues that are presented in each poem. But before we start today, let's have some follow-up questions based on our previous lesson. Question number 1. Who is the poet of Darkness Within the Lights? Who is a poet of Darkness Within the Lights? Our second question, state the mood of the poem. State the mood of the poem. Our third question, state the setting used in both poems. State the setting used in both poems. And our last question is to describe how symbolism is implied in the poem Darkness Within the Lights. Describe how symbolism is implied in the poem Darkness Within the Lights. I'll give you 1 minute to discuss your answers with your partner, then we will discuss your answers together. How are you going with our activity? Oh, that's awesome. Let's start with question number 1. Who is the poet of Darkness Within the Lights? Yes, you're correct. It is Karaka Karaka. Question number 2. State the mood of the poem. So this question, it refers to Darkness Within the Light as well. So the mood of the poem, if you can remember, it is from an angry perspective, or someone that is very angry. Question number 3, state the setting used in both poems. Well, both of our poems have different settings because of the origins of these poems. Father and Son, it was written in Samoa. So the setting, it was set in Samoa. In comparison to Darkness Within the Lights, it was set in the Cook Islands. Awesome. And our question number 4, describe how symbolism is implied in the poem Darkness Within the Lights. So do you remember what symbolism means? Yes, according to our previous lesson, we discussed that symbolism is just a fancy word of saying the using of symbols. So if you think about a symbol that is used in Darkness Within the Lights, you can think about the word darkness. Yes, and we also discussed that the darkness that is implied within Darkness Within the Lights, it talks about the misunderstanding between the first persona, which is the boy, and the second persona, which is a girl that received her education overseas. Then on her return, she changed. Well, that's our activity for our lesson for today. Okay, let's try and compare both of our poems, Father and Son and Darkness Within the Lights. We already understand that the poets, these are the people that wrote the poem. The first poem, it was written by Rupirake Betaya. Darkness Within the Light, it was written by Gauraka Gauraka. The targeted audience, so you need to ask yourself, who were these poems written for? They were both written for students. How do we know this? Because both poems talk about education and the way that people change when they return home from overseas studies. The tone of the poems are quite different. Father and Son, the first stanza, it was a very happy mood. And then the contrast, the second stanza, it was very sad. Because by the end of the poem, the father is asking himself, I wonder where in the darkness we lost each other, father and son. So the ending of this poem was quite sad. In comparison to Darkness Within the Lights, the persona was very angry by the tone. Do you remember how would you know that the persona was yelling? The use of the exclamation mark. Show off with your New Zealand degree. So the first line in this poem, it indicates that the persona was very angry. Imagery and symbolism, we talked about the difference between these two terms or these two poetic devices. Imagery is the use of images. So you think about, like I said before, when you are reading a poem, try to imagine what is a picture that you can paint or draw because you are inspired by some idea after you have read the poem. So the imagery that comes to my mind is a picture of a father and a son. They misunderstand each other. They have lost each other. Miscommunication. The father does not understand his son. In comparison to Darkness Within the Light, a boy is very annoyed with his friend. So you think about the first persona, the boy who stayed, he didn't go overseas, in comparison to the girl who received her education from overseas, and on her return, she was very different. So the image in my head is a picture of a boy and a girl that they are having this sort of dilemma because they do not understand each other. And our last comparison is the use of the word darkness. Both poems talk about darkness. The first poem, Father and Son, it talks about darkness. It metaphorically explains the difference of understanding between the father and the son. I wonder where in the darkness you lost each other, father and son. The father no longer likes the way that his son dresses, or he doesn't like the way that he speaks. And this is mentioned in the poem. In contrast to Darkness Within the Lights, it also mentions darkness. You are not aware of the darkness within your lights. And we already discussed this. There is no place darkness and it has light at the same time. Always remember, a place that is dark is because there is no light. Literally, that's what it means. Metaphorically, how it's implied in the poem, Someone that is bright, someone that is well educated, you have the light, but the darkness, it refers to the chores. Our culture practices, our traditional practices, your ignorance to do those traditional practice on a daily basis. And that is compared to someone who is in the darkness. We know the difference between the two poems. Our next step is how to write the essay. Okay, this is another very important skill that you need to understand. Response to literature, after you have studied and you have chosen your selected poems that you will be covering during the exams, you need to know how to write the essay. Any essay, we all should understand that there will always be an introduction, there will always be a body, and there will always be a conclusion. So a 3-part essay. So let's look at these two different formats. The first format, you have 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. So you have your introduction, the first paragraph. You need to reword the selected comments, define that comments, introduce the scope and the focus of your essay. The body parts, which will be your second paragraph, you will answer the comments according to the text, a brief summary of the text, quotations to support your ideas, and the last part is your explanation and your resolution. So your resolution is your application of the poem to yourself personally. So you do that for the first text and the second text. So the same format that you will use to analyze the first poem, you can do that for the second poem. And then last, you have your conclusion. In your conclusion, you're going to restate the comments, your overall analysis of both texts, and your overall resolution or your application. The difference between structure 1 and structure 2, structure 1, both texts are compared side by side within one paragraph. Structure number 2, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. You analyze each poem separately. So you have, for your first text, you will have it in your second paragraph, and the next text you will have it in your third paragraph. So regardless of what structure you choose to do, always remember it is very important to have paragraphs. And what are those paragraphs doing? Remember, each paragraph, they have sentences that make up that paragraph. So you need to understand the different formats that you will use within the exam to write a well-written essay. My advice is to analyze each poem separately, because if you analyze them together, as seen in the first style of writing, sometimes you will analyze one poem more than the other. Then your emphasis will be on one poem and it won't be the same as the other poem. But if you analyze it separately and have 4 different paragraphs, you will always make sure that the length of each paragraph is consistent. You analyze them equally the same. So again, if you look at our introduction, body, and conclusion paragraph, in your introduction, you're going to reword the selected comments, define the meaning of that comment. So the reason why you need to define the meaning of the comments, it indicates that you really understand what the comment means. And then you introduce the scope and the focus of your essay. So In your introduction, you need to indicate what you're going to write in your essay. In this essay, I will be focusing on symbolism and how it relates to the message. So you always need to indicate the scope of your essay. Your body paragraphs, always remember, answer the comments, a brief summary of the text, quotations to support your idea, then your explanation and resolution. The same analysis that you do for the first text is the same analysis that you're going to do for the second text in the next paragraph. Your conclusion, you're just trying to pull all of your ideas together. Nothing new. You're just going to re-emphasize or restate what you have mentioned in the body paragraphs. Restate the comments, your overall analysis of both texts, and your overall resolution. Let's have a look at a sample essay so I can show you how this essay or how these different paragraphs are written as an example in preparation for exams. Okay, let's look at our sample essay. Always remember, your essay, you need to select a comment. The comments, you need to understand the key words that are written in the comments. So when you write your essay, you cover the whole comment. So let's all read our chosen comment for today. Explain how poets use symbols to portray important messages that are relatable to their readers. Good. So it is asking about the symbols and it's asking about the messages. Those are the only two things that you will be focusing on in your comments. What are the symbols and what are the messages? One mistake that a lot of us make, we retell the whole poem. Just a plot summary. The poem was about the boy and his father. The poem's about a boy and a girl. But you totally forget the focus of your essay. It is stated in the comments. So always remember to read your comments carefully. Another good key thing to know when you're writing your essay, make sure that your poems that you have selected are by different poets. Just like our poems that we have studied so far, Father and Son and Karaka Karaka were written by two different poets. Awesome. So let's look at our introduction. Pacific poets use different techniques such as symbols to portray important morals for their readers. So if you think about the word techniques, what I've done here is reword or put another word to replace symbols. And if you think about symbols, it is a poetic device. A poetic device or a feature or the style or way that the poet writes his or her poem. And those are all categorized under the word techniques, such as symbols to portray important morals. So morals here is replacing the word messages. Remember, in each poem it has a message. That message is key. It gives people different perspective on how to deal with problems, either social issues or problems within their own family. For the readers, these morals reflect observed situations faced by their communities. And then the bottom part of your introduction, this part, it is your, yes, it's the scope of your essay. So what are you going to write? What are you going to do within your essay? This essay will explain how symbols are used. So this is R. This essay will explain how symbols are used in both poems and how they relate to their readers. So always remember, to include your comments in the scope, because your scope is telling the reader or the teacher who is going to read your writing what you are actually going to do in your essay. So this is our first paragraph, or your introduction. Your second paragraph, so this is your second paragraph, you are going to analyze the first text. So the first text is Father and Son. Father and Son by Ruperake Petaya uses the symbol of darkness to portray the message of disconnection between the Father and the Son. So again, going back to our structure, in the first sentence of your analysis for your paragraph 2 and paragraph 3, you need to answer the question, answer the comments. The comments is asking us about the symbol and the message. You have stated that in your first sentence, the symbol of darkness and the message of disconnection. And then you give a brief summary of the poem. So when I'm saying a brief summary, you don't need to talk about the whole poem again. The only thing that you're going to do is to state the most important parts in the poem by using only 2 sentences. Just like this. This poem explains the challenges that the son showed towards changes that the son showed towards his father when he returned from studying overseas. So in this sentence, it is a brief summary of what Father and Son was about. It's about a father and the son showed changes when he returned from overseas. The next part in our structure, you need to quote. You need to use quotes to strengthen your answer. And you can never quote if you do not know the poem off by heart. As quoted, he dresses and you don't want to see him. And I wonder where in the darkness you lost each other. So these are quotes. How do you know they are quotes? Because you are using quotation you're using the quotation marks. So open and close inverted commas. It indicates that this is a quote that reflect the feeling of misunderstanding between the father and the son. The symbol of darkness reflects the disappointment of the father towards the way his son speaks and dresses. Furthermore, Petaya compares his disappointment with someone that is lost in the dark. Ruperake Petaya, so this part at the bottom is your application. So how would you apply what you have learned from the poem in writing? And that is the bottom part or the last part of your structure. Ruperake Petaya reminds his readers to never forget the love and support their parents, and that we should also remember that our actions reflect our love and respect towards others, especially our parents. So this is a very lovely tie that ties all of your main ideas together by using your application at the bottom of your first body paragraph. And if you compare it to the second body paragraph, it's exactly the same structure as the first body paragraph. The only difference is you're taking bits and pieces of the quotes here from the second text, and also the message or the resolution stated at the bottom of your answer is also different. Okay, let's read through our second body paragraph. In addition, so look at the way that we use the word in addition. These words are called transition. So always remember to use transitional words. You can't use in addition here because in addition is something adding on an idea from a previous idea. So if you use in addition here, in addition to what paragraph? To the introduction paragraph. So it doesn't make sense. Using in addition, the second body paragraph means it's referring to the first body paragraph. In addition, Darkness Within the Light by Karaka Karaka also uses the symbol of darkness. Again, it's answering the comments to convey the disappointment of the boy towards his female friend that returned from her overseas studies. This poem explains, so again, you give a brief summary. This poem explains a friendship between a girl that went overseas for her studies and a boy that continues to do daily routines. The boy observed that his friend has changed and he assumes that she thinks that she is smarter than him. As quoted, "Think you're smart and you are not aware of the darkness within the light." So again, these are two quotes from the poem. It indicates that the boy and the girl is having some sort of dilemma. Reflects the dilemma between the boy and the girl. The poet also uses the symbol of darkness to vividly explain the attitude of the girl. She has neglected her role in doing daily routines. Okay, and then the bottom part, again, just like your first body paragraph, it is your application. Karaka Karaka reminds his readers that the reflection of your education is mirrored the way you walk and talk on a daily basis, especially the way that you treat others. And then last paragraph is your conclusion. In conclusion, both poems use the symbol of darkness to portray important messages such as remembering the love of your parents and treating others with respect. These messages relate to all readers and how they act in a certain way towards their parents and loved ones. We should always remember that our actions speak louder than our words. So this is tying all of the ideas that you have already mentioned in your second and your first body paragraph, tying it all together, making sure that you have answered the comments, you have mentioned the symbol of darkness and the messages here, as you have already explained them in your body paragraph, and that is your essay. So always remember, it comes down to your planning and understanding the structure. If you don't have a plan, or if you don't know how to structure your paragraphs carefully, your essay will go round and round in circles, and it seems like you're very confused about what you're actually doing. Okay, student, that's all that we have time for today. Always remember, practice makes perfect. Do not give up on your writing skills. Make sure that you practice and keep on practicing. Look at our structure. Look at the way that you format your essay in order for you to write an amazing essay for exams. But for now, till